Dear friends, welcome. This is our third video on parenting. In this third video we are going to talk about a special subject, but first I will start with giving you a little bit of a summary on what we did before. In the first video, as you know, we introduced a little bit of the topic about parenting and we started to talk about the preparation for pregnancy, and then we started thinking about some other things. What you're doing in the preparation and what you're doing during the pregnancy is very important because it helps your child to appreciate goodness. You first studied goodness, and then after some time you teach your children this, of course, during the pregnancy, and you keep continuing in teaching this after the pregnancy. When the child is born and you have helped your child to have a comfortable birth, and I'm not talking about cesarean, then at that moment you can start thinking about the next phase. No, actually you should have thought about it already before. And this video is meant to help you introduce the other things that you need to do or that you can think about as a Daoist, and how you then contribute to the well-being of the child in the best way possible. The reason why is because a child is a little bit like a lotus flower. From the moment when it is born, you can see that its destiny is to be developing itself like a lotus flower, every time opening another petal, learning a new skill and trying to master the new body, grow the new body, and so on and so on. The children are very hot and they're very young. They don't have much body, so they're not very yin. And at the moment when they develop further and further and further, they continuously master new skills. When there is something wrong because the father or the mother is wrong or the connection with heaven and earth is not right, then at that moment the child is being born with handicaps. To a large degree, many of these handicaps, they can be overcome, but there are boundaries to these limits, to the limits that you have. So at the moment when you are getting to the point where the child is born, you have to learn to appreciate the fact that they are like that. And the things that you teach your child are the same things that you need too for your life. So everything that I tell now in this video is basically a foundation for what every person in life needs according to a variety of Taoist sources. So I will take a few, I have selected a few Taoist sources for you to explain on the basis of these sources what you want to give to your child in the first period of life. And for this we have to ask ourselves a few questions. First of all, you want to understand that according to the huangdineijing, the weft of the internals of a human being, basically, that life develops in cycles. Like all time, according to Chinese culture, everything is cyclical and develops over time into different phases. And your life develops for a man in cycles of 8 years and for a woman in cycles of 7 years. And that means that you go through a bunch of cycles before you die. Now, if you do very well, this cycling goes on endlessly, and you have to understand a few things, and the education of your child is to a large degree these things that you need to know so that you do not have to die. One of the things that you need to know is that you are born with, well, what we normally summarize as huangdineijing. You are born with a natural endowment of being human. And this being human is the first thing you have to learn. If you go look into our cycle about wilderness, you will see a lot of things about immortality and stuff like this. But if you are looking at this video for this moment for parenting, we don't need to go that far. The main thing that the huangdineijing says, if you do let go of your natural endowment of being human, then you start giving in to the impulses, namely to be attracted by colors, tastes, sounds, and so forth and so forth. And as a result of that, you are going to get lost. Yeah, that's basically the best word. You're going to get lost. And as a result of that, you are going to receive damage. So that means that our pleasure seeking, our adventure seeking, our seeking for quality and so on, all these kind of things are things that are deafening our senses and also deafening our mind at the same time. The mind in that sense you can see as a sense organ. At the moment when you look at things from that perspective, you can really see that being a human is the only thing that we have to learn in life. All the other things like mathematics, writing, reading and so on, great to function in this kind of society, great to be able to have a profession and to take care of yourself and your family and so on. But this is not the main point as far as Daoism is concerned. Daoism is in favor of learning, is in favor of education and so on. And we're going to talk about these kind of things. In the first 7 or 8 years, whether you're a woman or a man, you have to understand that the cyclical nature is about the development of your organs. So in the first 7-8 years, you are developing to a point where you as a child, you become more independent from your parents. When you are born, you are completely helpless and you open up and you open up and you open up and you start, well, developing a body, physical abilities, mental abilities, emotional abilities, and so forth and so forth. And at the moment when you are learning these kind of things, very gradually you start developing in the direction of being a human. As a parent, you have to guide that process. And in the first 7 years, your kidneys are the prime organ to be developed, and in this development of the kidneys, all the organs get nourished. Then you go through 5 of these cycles in your life, and these 5 cycles together, the first cycle, the second cycle, the third cycle, and the 5th cycle, they first stimulate the growth of the kidneys so that the kidneys become fully functional, then the liver, then the heart, and then the spleen, pancreas, and then the lungs, and then the next cycle starts again with the kidneys. So this first cycle of 35 to 40 years, this is the period where you reach maturity. So that means that by the time you're 35, basically then at that moment you're finished growing. Physically, yeah, sure, you're finished growing already much earlier, but in the first 7 years, 8 years, this process is going very fast. So now the things that we are going to talk about are the things that are most important for the first 8 years. Because the child has to be ready for the next 8 years. The kidneys are about the huangdineijing. They are talk about the yin and yang. And at the moment when the yin is growing, that means your body is growing. At the moment when the yang is growing, your ability is growing. And that is what we focus on. So when you have a child, from the first moment, as you saw in the 30 days recovery period for the mother, your child has to receive or should receive baby massage to make sure that it becomes very mobile. To start with physical education for a child, it is good to do this already at a very early age. So at the moment when the child starts walking, you try to stimulate it to walk as quickly and as good as possible. So from the moment when it is born, you start making it aware of the fact that it has to support itself through its legs and its arms. The faster you begin, the better. And gradually the movements have to become more complex. So at the moment when they become more complex, they can sit, they can stand. When they can sit, they should sit straight up. when they can stand, they should be able to stand straight up. You have to teach them how to stand properly, like standing on the heels instead of standing on the front foot. Because when you're standing on the front foot, you lean forward, and you're actually standing out of balance. You put way more pressure on your spinal column than actually necessary, and you also put your dantian out of sync. So as a child, you should start learning also about the biological functions of your body. You can't understand them things. But what is very important is the next I'm going to tell you. The first text I'm going to talk about is the taipingjing. There is a translation of it, so you don't have to worry about that. I will give that in a list separate. At the moment, when you are being a child, you have to understand that there is very little you actually really understand. It is not possible even to understand. So teaching a child facts is not really very important, not in that stage anyway. So when they are after the first cycle, learning about facts becomes more important. But as you can see from Chinese culture, you can teach skills very early on. Like at 2, they should be able to write. They should be able to understand who is who at about 2 years old, and so forth and so forth. So there's a lot of different kind of things that a child has to learn. But in general, the idea of the taipingjing is that it's very important at the beginning of your life to develop a grasp of things, because it says when you do not have a grasp of things, you cannot know things, you cannot understand things, right? So the Chinese word for knowing, Dao, means actually gathering wisdom. So first you have to have a sort of an inkling. What we in the West usually call an intuition. An intuition like, oh, it's probably like that. At the moment when you have an intuition, you don't know anything yet. You are just starting to have an inkling, and then you have to go research it and investigate it to be able to know what it actually means. So education of your child by the school, but also by you, should be based on developing in the child grasps of things. They don't have to be correct, but it's better, of course, if they are correct. So if you are a little bit knowledgeable and you are knowing about things, then it's easier to give your kids an inkling about how things are. Like in my case, I drop hints about incarnation, about how feelings work and how all kinds of things work, how your personal development works, that children are a little bit like lotus flowers, that are opening and blooming on both a physiological as well on the psychological level, that they have a task, namely to be a good human. And that is very important, namely that you have to start developing an idea of the theoretical concepts underpinning reality. Like for instance, Daoists tend to teach their children about interdependencies. That means that they have to see that one thing depends on something else. Like for instance, I have a twin, so it's very easy. And I solve a lot of problems by showing that if one person does something wrong, other people are also punished by that when they are being caught. So if one, for instance, doesn't clean up the room and cannot, say for instance, watch on a pad or on a telephone for playing games, then the other one cannot do it too, so that they become aware of the fact that the actions of the one influences the results of the other. This is in daily life the same. If my family in one country is in war, then in another country we have the effect of that. When there is a famine in one country, other countries notice that result too. When things were more separate and the world was not yet one big global community, we didn't know about these things, but they still affected us one way or the other. When we are trying to teach children, therefore, it is important to give them a suggestion, an idea. You don't have to be very precise, but it has to go into the right direction. So that means you have to canalize the thoughts and the feelings. Children need boundaries, and these boundaries, they are there to help them develop. They're not just boundaries about what they can do, what they cannot do for learning morality, but also boundaries about what is the limitations on their time, about what can be used for their time, and what should be spent on specific learning to develop their skills. Like for instance, when a child is very young, it is like 2-3 years old, go play yoga with them. They like that. But do not do soft yoga, meditation and so on, because the mind is not formed. And at the moment when you do meditation, like what people mostly do, you basically undermine the mental progress. And as a result that they become dreamy kind of people, which is very nice and romantic and so on and so on. But it is also damaging their capacity to become great human beings. So when they are like 12, 13, yeah, meditation can be very helpful to deal with the stress of school and so on. The meditations that they need, they are actually physical meditation. So they have to meditate on what their body could do. So at the moment when they do yoga, it has to become a little bit acrobatic. This is also why I teach my kids already from very young age yoga, but I also teach them kung fu. I teach this particular long form kung fu, which is also going to be available in the late winter, early spring, from the spring festival, hopefully. To follow as a course. You can sign up for that already if you want. If you have kids, it is good to do that for yourself because it helps you develop your stamina and your strength and so forth and so forth. But it also especially is a very helpful tool to build a better relationship with your children, but it also teaches the children how to take care of their body, how to take care of their breath, and how to take care of their strength, and how to enhance the eye, hand, and foot coordination, so that they start developing an understanding about the three-dimensional space that they're actually in, and also the effect of inflicting pain on other people and how other people can inflict pain on them, because that is also the foundation for moral education, because a lot of actions that we have, the things we say, the things we do, they have moral implications in the sense that we hurt people with it, or people are hurting us through that. So when we can understand that, we can learn to defend ourselves against it and therefore be, well, better people. The next person I want to talk about is Ge. Ge wrote a text which is called baopuzi, Children Embrace Simplicity. So as a textbook, it is very often translated as the master who embraces simplicity, as if it is about him, but it's actually about people in general. And it is called, Zi means metaphorically master, but it actually means also your childlike nature. Your childlike nature is very important because at the moment when you're between 0 and 7 years old or 8 years old, this is the period where you're best in learning things. Like for instance, before you're 6 or 7, you can learn easily 5, 6 languages because your capacity to understand these languages is optimized at that moment. When you're older, you learn a language, it is much more difficult. So it is good to teach your children 2, 3 languages when they are young, because every language allows you to think in a particular kind of way. So they learn 2, 3 different ways of logic. French or English are not the same, even though they have the same roots. Their way of thinking is different. Chinese and English are also not the same. They have a very different way of thinking, and as a result of that, they teach you other ways of looking at things, especially when you do something creative, you want to do something in art, or you want to do something in science. Then it's very important to understand the different nature of things so that you can gradually develop yourself faster and deeper, because it also helps you to understand other people. The baopuzi talks in one of the chapters in relationship to education as xingli. Xingli is basically the combination of form, your body form, and the form of you as a person, as well as your ability to reason. It says in this xingli concept that learning is a way to clean and to purify your xingli, both your form and your reasoning. These kind of things are very important because everybody can have thoughts, right? But really thinking is a very difficult thing to achieve. All over history, when people were having philosophers and thinkers about how do things work, one of the thoughts that they come across is like, okay, everybody can have thoughts. You can see that in the political climate with all these people with strange opinions, and that for reasons of power are following all kinds of suggestions and actually behave in a very demonic way, in a very barbaric way, you can say. You can really see that the West especially is a very barbaric environment where people can do things that you normally only would see in movies, but they do them in reality. And in this principle, it is important that through learning, you are developing yourself physically and mentally in a particular kind of way. So your physical education, when you start in an early age and you learn to appreciate physical movement and so on, is very important. You see nowadays everybody's trying to do dance and all these kind of things. This is great, but as I said before, all these intense emotions from heavy colors and sounds and stuff like this, they are just confusing, they overburden you, and so on and so on. Children are by nature creatures that don't really need anything except being able to develop themselves. And although it is fun to do all kinds of things, what they need is things that help them throughout life. So the more things you learn to a child that are actually just fun, the less they are capable to actually lead a useful life. When you are born poor or when you are born rich, it doesn't really matter. When you are born, you don't know anything. And everything that you learn, you think that is normal. So if you want to spoil your child with giving them expensive gifts or giving them important things, that you do for yourself. You don't do that for your child. In fact, you make the chance for the child to appreciate things in a very valuable way much smaller. And it doesn't mean that they shouldn't have a pet or they shouldn't have games or anything like that. It's not what I'm saying. It's just that you have to be very careful in what you give and when you give it, and so on and so on. Because the simple reason that when you give too much, they become confused. And the world is full of confused people, as you know. That's why so many people behave very barbaric. And as a result of this confusion, our world does not get into a better place. And you have already noticed, probably when you watch this video also, not because of what I say, but it's a particular aspect of audiences, you have probably already seen that the world is not in a very good state. Although from a distance it still looks like a blue-green planet, there are larger and larger parts getting yellow, and when you look at a more small scale, more and more parts are full of garbage. I'm sorry, dear friends. Here we are going to end today again this episode. We're going to continue in the next episode. Without your participation and without your support, I cannot make these videos. So thank you very much for your help. I look forward to see you in the next premiere or in the next episode or in one of the classes or anything like that. It is great so far.